10 days before my birthday, strange love letters started appearing in my locker. They were always marked with the signature four-sided love heart only my best friend Akemi used to draw, but she came out a year ago and dumped her girlfriend 3 months ago. Still, she was blushing at me from across the hallway when she saw. I was so suspicious I cornered her after chemistry, asking her to help me track down the culprit. She started stammering like she always does when she goes red. I'd love to. Before I knew it, the two of us were sneaking into the security camera office, and our hands were touching trying to find the exact time the letters were left. I want to make you mine. I'd read the letters aloud to her, looking at her face getting redder, unsure if this was a coincidence or an inside joke about our shared Minecraft world. I remember feeling so guilty about how I secretly hoped it was somehow her, but then a week before my birthday, I got another letter. Akemi and I ripped it open together like usual, but instead of the lovey, wholesome writing I'd come to expect, this letter was darker. I followed you home last night. It could have been so easy. My jaw dropped, but it was Akemi's reaction that caught me most off guard. That's not how it's supposed to. She instantly stopped talking like she'd said too much. The next letter was worse. 6 days until your birthday. 6 days until you can't ignore me anymore. The handwriting pressed so hard it tore through the paper. Akemi read this one 3 times, mouthing words that weren't there, like she was comparing it to something in her memory. I mentioned calling the police to her, and that's when she panicked. No, maybe this person is just emotional. People write things they don't mean when they're hurt. I decided to test her 4 days before my birthday. I told her I got a letter mentioning our inside joke about penguins, something only she knew. She immediately said, "But I didn't write about Peng," then caught herself. I mean, that's weird someone would know that. My heart skipped a beat. It was definitely her, but why had the letters turned threatening? 3 days before my birthday came, the worst one. You'll regret every moment you looked through me. Your birthday will be the last day you ignore what's right in front of you. The day before my birthday, Akemi was frantic. She showed up at my house at 10 p.m., something she'd never done. Promise me you'll come to my house tomorrow at 3 p.m. No matter what letters you get tonight or tomorrow morning. Promise me. Her desperation scared me more than any letter had. She knew something was coming. My birthday morning brought a final letter, slipped under my bedroom door while I slept. Today, everything changes. Come alone, or everyone will know what you really are. My parents wanted to call the police immediately, but Akemi's text came through. My house, 3 p.m. Bring every letter. I can explain everything. Please trust me even though I know how this looks. Driving to her house, I kept thinking about all the clues, the hearts only she drew, the inside joke knowledge, her strange reactions, her girlfriend's story that never quite added up. No photos, no social media posts. No one ever saw them together. I walked into her living room to find Akemi pacing frantically, her sister Yui slouched on the couch texting, and their parents looking confused. You came, Akemi breathed, then turned to her family. Now I'm going to show everyone what's been happening. What are you talking about? Her mother asked. That's when Akemi pulled out her phone with shaking hands. 3 days ago, I came home early. Her sister Yui instantly whipped her head around. I could see her holding her breath all of a sudden. I caught Yui in my room. Yui was rising to her feet. You're just anxious, sister. She went to talk over Akemi, but Akemi's voice remained firm. Yui was at my desk with my letters. Akemi's voice cracked. The letters I was too scared to send. Yui lunged to grab the phone in Akemi's hand, but Akemi was stepping back. I recorded Yui rewriting my letters, then sealing them so they'd end up in OP's locker. She pressed play. The footage showed Yui doing exactly that, changing "I think about you every night" to "I watch you every night," changing "Your birthday will be special" to "Your birthday will be the end." Why Yui? Akemi yelled. That's when Yui fully lost it, and her tears erupted. Because you're pathetic, she yelled. You're writing love letters to a boy who thinks you're a lesbian. My friend deserves OP more than you do. My jaw dropped as I realized everything, but Akemi wasn't done. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. Yui knew you'd recognize those letters were from me. She wanted you to become so scared of me, you'd distance yourself and never speak to me again. That's not the full story, Yui suddenly yelled. Before we knew it, Yui was confessing the real reason she did everything. She didn't care about her friend ending up with me. Her friend just came from money. She promised Yui $1,000 if Yui stopped Akemi from confessing her love to me. Her parents exploded, even angrier now, dragging Yui out, who had mascara streaming down her face. But I couldn't focus on them. Only on Akemi, standing there exposed and terrified. The lesbian story was a lie, she whispered. I thought if you believed I was gay, I could stay close without risking rejection. But I've been in love with you since 7th grade. Her voice broke. Will you be my boyfriend? My mouth opened, but nothing came out for what felt like forever, while Akemi stood there shaking with tears running down her face. The living room suddenly felt way too quiet without her parents and Yui making noise. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I tried to process everything that just happened. Looking at her standing there so scared and vulnerable made my chest feel tight in a way I couldn't explain. I took a deep breath and finally managed to say yes. I'd be her boyfriend, but we needed to take things slow after all this craziness. The relief that washed over her face was instant, and she basically collapsed forward into my arms. We hugged for the first time, knowing it meant something more than friendship, and it felt completely different. Her whole body was shaking against mine, and I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt. All those hugs before suddenly made sense in a new way, knowing she'd been in love with me the whole time. We stayed like that for a few minutes until we both pulled back, exhausted from everything that just went down. She said we should talk more tomorrow when our brains weren't so fried from the confrontation with Yui. I nodded and headed for the door, both of us too overwhelmed to say much else. The drive home gave me time to think, but my brain kept jumping between being happy about Akemi and worried about the whole mess with Yui. When I walked through my front door, my parents were sitting in the living room, obviously waiting for me. Mom jumped up immediately asking what happened at Akemi's house and if I was okay. I sat down and explained everything from the beginning about the video evidence Akemi had recorded. I told them about Yui changing the letters to make them scary and threatening instead of sweet. Then I explained the money part, how some girl named Alina Whitney paid Yui $1,000 to sabotage Akemi. My dad's face got really red when he heard about the bribe, and he started pacing around the room. Mom kept asking if we should still call the police about those threatening letters, even though we knew who did it now. I mentioned that Akemi asked me to be her boyfriend at the end, and Mom's whole expression changed to concern. She started asking a million questions about whether I was ready for that after everything that happened. Dad said we needed to document everything and maybe talk to someone at the school about what Yui did. That night, I couldn't sleep at all and kept staring at my ceiling, replaying every single moment with Akemi from the past year. Every time she'd turned red when I got close suddenly made perfect sense now. All those times she found excuses to hang out or help me with homework weren't just friendship. The way she'd stammer and get nervous around me wasn't random, but because she had feelings she was hiding. Around 2 a.m, I couldn't stand it anymore and texted her asking if she was okay. She texted back immediately saying she couldn't sleep either and was still processing everything that happened. We texted back and forth for an hour about random stuff, neither of us mentioning the boyfriend-girlfriend thing directly. The next morning at the school felt weird knowing everything was different now between us. I found Akemi at her locker before first period, and we both stood there awkwardly, not knowing how to act. She looked nervous, but also happy in a way I'd never seen before, like a weight had been lifted. Then she handed me an envelope with my name written on it in her handwriting. Inside was a letter with her actual feelings written out, not the scary stuff Yui had changed them to. At the bottom was one of her 4-sided hearts, drawn perfectly, like always. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket while she watched with this small smile on her face. We walked to class together trying to act normal, but I could tell people were already noticing something was different. At lunch, her whole friend group was staring at us confused when we sat down together. One of them asked Akemi about her girlfriend from last year since they all thought she was gay. Akemi's face went red, and she looked at me before taking a deep breath to explain. She told them she needed to clear something up about the whole lesbian thing, but wanted to talk to her closest friends privately first. We both knew rumors would start flying around school about the letters and us being together now. After school, my parents were already in the car waiting to drive to the counselor's office. They'd made an appointment with Deborah Lawson, who handles serious stuff like harassment and bullying at our school. Mom had printed out copies of all the threatening letters Yui had rewritten and put them in a folder. Walking into Lawson's office felt really official and serious with all of us sitting around her desk. She read through each letter carefully while taking notes, and her face got more concerned with each one. She said this definitely counted as harassment, and we needed to file an official report even if we didn't press charges. My parents agreed and started filling out paperwork while Lawson asked me specific questions about dates and times. That evening I was doing homework when my phone buzzed with a text from Akemi. She said her parents had put Yui on total lockdown with no phone, no friends, no anything except school. Apparently, Yui had spent hours crying in her room and writing some long apology letter to everyone. Akemi said she wasn't ready to forgive her sister yet, after everything she'd done to us. Her family had already scheduled an emergency therapy session for later in the week to deal with everything. The next day, I was in second period when I got called to the vice principal's office over the loudspeaker. Walking down the empty hallway, I felt nervous, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Nathaniel Saxton was sitting behind his desk with a copy of the incident report Lawson had filed. He went through each threatening letter, asking me questions about how they made me feel and what happened. Then he said this was serious harassment that broke multiple school policies and could have legal consequences. He needed to interview both Yui and this Alina Whitney girl, who supposedly paid her to do it. By the time I got back to class, everyone was staring at me, wondering why I'd been called to the office. Throughout the day, I kept hearing whispers and seeing people point when they thought I wasn't looking. The rumors were already spreading and getting more ridiculous with each retelling of the story. Some people thought I'd been stalking Akemi, and that's why I got called to the office. Others heard there was some love triangle with me, Akemi, and her sister, which made me want to throw up. Akemi and I tried to ignore all the staring and whispering, but it made walking through the hallways really uncomfortable. The next day, during free period, Akemi found her usual group sitting by the windows in the library, and I watched from across the room as she sat down with them. She started explaining everything, and I could see their faces changing from confused to shocked as she told them about pretending to be gay. Most of her friends were nodding and reaching out to touch her arm, but one girl named Sarah stood up and walked away with tears in her eyes. Akemi ran after her into the hallway, and I followed at a distance to see Sarah turning around with her face all red. Sarah told Akemi she'd trusted her with her own coming-out story and now felt like their whole friendship was fake. Akemi kept apologizing over and over, while Sarah just shook her head and left. That afternoon, Lawson called all our parents in for a big meeting in the conference room next to the main office. My mom and dad sat on one side of the table while Akemi's parents sat on the other side with us in between. Lawson spread out copies of all the threatening letters and started talking about safety plans and documentation. She mentioned getting a no-contact order to keep Yui away from me at the school, and my dad immediately agreed. Akemi's mom looked really upset about separating her daughters, but understood it was necessary. We talked about Alina possibly trying something else, and Lawson said we needed to document every single interaction from now on. She gave us all incident report forms to carry and told us to write down anything suspicious immediately. The next morning, Saxton called Yui and her parents into his office, and I heard about it later from Akemi, who was waiting outside. Yui started crying the second she sat down and pulled out her phone to show the bank app. There was a $500 deposit from Alina with a note saying, "half now, half later," in the description. Yui's dad grabbed the phone and stared at it like he couldn't believe his daughter sold out her sister for money. Saxton took screenshots of everything while Yui explained how Alina approached her at lunch one day. She said Alina knew about Akemi's feelings for me and offered the money to stop her from confessing. Yui admitted she was jealous of how much attention Akemi always got, and the money made it seem worth it. Her parents looked sick as she talked about rewriting each letter to be more threatening. 2 days later, Officer Green showed up in his uniform and started interviewing everyone involved. He came to my English class and pulled me out to ask about the letters and how they affected me. I told him about not being able to sleep and checking my locker constantly with my hands shaking. He wrote everything down in his notebook and said the money-changing hands made this way more serious. He explained that harassment was bad enough, but conspiracy with payment could mean real legal trouble. He needed to interview Akemi next and then look at all the evidence we'd collected so far. That weekend, Akemi and I tried to go on a normal date to the coffee shop downtown. We'd barely sat down with our drinks when 3 kids from the school walked in and started whispering. One of them said loud enough for us to hear that Akemi turned straight for me, which made her grip her cup so hard I thought it would break. She whispered that sexuality doesn't work like that, and people can be attracted to whoever without changing labels. More kids from the school showed up, and everyone kept staring and pointing at us. We left our drinks half-finished and went to sit in my car where Akemi started crying about how unfair everything was. The following Monday, Lawson set up an appointment for me with the school therapist to talk about the trauma from the letters. I sat in the small office with tissues on the table and tried to explain how scared I'd been. The therapist said, even though the threats weren't real from Yui, my fear response was completely valid. She taught me breathing exercises for when I felt anxious, and we talked about how trauma affects the body. I admitted I still jumped when anyone came up behind me and had trouble trusting that people meant what they said. Meanwhile, Alina got called to Saxton's office, but she showed up with both parents and a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. They all sat down, and the lawyer did all the talking while Alina just stared at the wall. He said the money was a personal loan between friends and had nothing to do with any letters. Saxton showed him the screenshots with the "half now, half later" message, but the lawyer said that didn't prove anything. Alina's parents sat there with their arms crossed, looking more worried about their reputation than the truth. The lawyer threatened to sue the school for defamation if they took any action against Alina without proof. Later that week, Officer Green went through hours of security footage from the school cameras. He found clear video of Yui at my locker on 5 different days, at the exact times I found letters. The timestamps matched perfectly with when I discovered each threatening note in my locker. He even caught her looking around nervously before slipping the papers through the vents. He made copies of all the footage and added it to the growing pile of evidence against both girls. Akemi's parents decided not to wait for the scheduled therapy appointment and drove Yui straight to a therapist that day. The therapist spent 2 hours with her and diagnosed serious jealousy issues that needed immediate treatment. Yui had to start going twice a week and keeping a journal about her feelings and triggers. Her parents had to pay out of pocket since insurance wouldn't cover emergency mental health intervention. By Friday, some kids started saying we made the whole thing up for attention, which made me so mad I punched my locker. Akemi grabbed my hand before I could hurt myself and suggested we write something for the school newspaper. We spent the weekend working with Lawson to write a statement that explained the harassment without giving too many personal details. Monday morning, my parents sat across from a lawyer in her office downtown while I tried not to fidget in the uncomfortable leather chair. She spread out copies of all the threatening letters on her desk and read through each one carefully while taking notes on a yellow pad. My mom kept squeezing my dad's hand every time the lawyer frowned at something particularly bad. The lawyer explained we could file for a restraining order against Yui right away and potentially sue Alina's family for emotional distress since money changed hands. She showed us similar cases where families won settlements for their kids being targeted like this. My parents asked about the chances of winning, and she said the evidence was strong, but these things take time and energy. After an hour of discussing options, my parents decided to wait and see what the school would do first before taking legal action. That same afternoon, Akemi was scrolling through Instagram when she found Alina's account filled with posts about her. The posts called Akemi an attention-seeking fake who made up the whole letter thing for sympathy. Alina had even posted a photo of Akemi from last year with the caption about how some people will do anything for a boyfriend. Akemi's hands shook as she took screenshot after screenshot of every single post and comment. She found more on Twitter where Alina was telling people that Akemi lied about being gay just to trick me. There were dozens of posts going back days, each one worse than the last. Akemi printed everything out and brought the stack of papers straight to Officer Green's office at the school. He looked through each page carefully and said this showed a clear pattern of continued harassment that would strengthen the case significantly. Tuesday morning, the principal called all of us into his office, including both sets of parents. He sat behind his big desk, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He announced that after reviewing all the evidence, he was scheduling a formal disciplinary hearing for both Yui and Alina. This wasn't just detention or suspension talk anymore. He explained that depending on the findings, both girls could face expulsion from the district. The hearing would happen next week with a panel of administrators from different schools to ensure fairness. All parties would present their evidence and witnesses could testify. Yui's mom started crying when she heard the word expulsion. The principal said he had no choice given the severity and the money involved. That weekend, Akemi came over and we escaped into our Minecraft world like we used to do before everything got complicated. We worked on expanding our castle and building new rooms, not talking about the drama for once. It felt good to just place blocks and dig tunnels together without thinking about letters or hearings or lawyers. Akemi built this huge heart-shaped house out of pink wool as a joke, and we both actually laughed for the first time since my birthday. We stayed up until 3 in the morning just building random stuff and eating pizza. For a few hours, it felt like we were just normal friends again, not two people dealing with harassment and threats. Sunday night, I found a thick envelope shoved under my bedroom door with my name written on it. Inside was a 3-page letter from Yui that her therapist had helped her write. She explained how watching Akemi light up whenever I walked by made her feel invisible and worthless in comparison. She wrote about always being in her sister's shadow and how the money from Alina felt like finally someone was choosing her for once. She said she knew it was wrong, but the jealousy ate at her until she couldn't think straight anymore. The letter ended with her saying she understood if I never forgave her, but wanted me to know she was getting help. I read it twice, then put it in my desk drawer because I wasn't ready to forgive her yet. Monday morning, Lawson called me to her office to show me the new schedule she'd created. She'd rearranged things so Yui and I would never cross paths during the school day. Yui had to eat lunch in the counseling office now instead of the cafeteria. She took different stairwells between classes and had to wait 5 minutes after the bell to leave each room. Lawson showed me the map with our routes highlighted in different colors to show they never overlapped. It looked complicated, but she said it was necessary for everyone's comfort and safety right now. Tuesday night, my parents were watching TV when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Alina's parents stood on our porch asking to come in and discuss the situation privately. They sat on our couch and started talking about misunderstandings and how teenagers sometimes blow things out of proportion. Then Alina's dad mentioned that they understood we'd had expenses from this whole situation and pulled out his checkbook. He started writing while saying something about making things right without all the legal mess. My dad stood up and told them to leave immediately. My mom was already calling Officer Green to report the bribe attempt. The next morning, Green told us this would backfire badly for them, since witness tampering was a serious crime. Wednesday, I noticed Akimi freezing up in the crowded hallway between second and third period. Her breathing got fast, and her hands started shaking when a group of kids pushed past us. She grabbed my arm and pulled me into an empty classroom where she sat down and put her head between her knees. She said she kept thinking everyone was staring and judging her for lying about being gay. The school therapist found us there and taught Akimi some breathing exercises to help with the panic. We worked out a system where I'd walk with her between classes when possible, and she'd text me if she needed help. Thursday, the school newspaper came out with our statement on the front page. Kids read it during homeroom and lunch, and most people seemed supportive. 3 different students came up to me that day to share their own stories about being bullied or manipulated. One girl said Alina had spread rumors about her last year, too. A guy from my math class said he'd been getting anonymous threats, but was too scared to report them until now. By the end of the day, 5 more students had gone to the counselor with their own harassment stories. Friday afternoon, Officer Green asked me and my parents to come to his office for an update. He explained that he'd sent everything to the district attorney's office for review. The DA was considering criminal charges for both girls, but these things moved slowly through the system. He said Yui cooperating and getting help would work in her favor. But Alina's social media posts and her parents trying to bribe us showed a pattern of trying to cover things up. Green said she could face actual criminal charges for conspiracy and witness tampering. He warned us the legal process could take months, but the prosecutors were taking it seriously. The weekend passed in a blur of texts and phone calls from classmates wanting to know what was really going on. But Monday brought a surprise when Akimi's friend Sarah finally agreed to meet with her at the coffee shop near school. I went along for support and watched Sarah sit across from us with her arms crossed, clearly still hurt about being lied to for a whole year. Akemi started explaining how scared she was of losing me if I knew the truth, how she thought the fake girlfriend story would let her stay close without risking our friendship, and how the pressure to label herself before she was ready made everything worse. Sarah listened without interrupting for 20 minutes, while Akemi talked about identity and fear, and how sometimes we hide behind lies because the truth feels too dangerous. Sarah finally uncrossed her arms and said she understood the fear, but needed time to rebuild trust, though she was willing to try being friends again slowly. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Wednesday morning in the conference room next to the principal's office, and walking in felt like entering a courtroom with the long table where administrators sat facing rows of chairs for everyone involved. Mr. Saxton started by presenting all the evidence they'd collected, including copies of the threatening letters, the security footage of Yui at my locker, the video Akimi took of Yui rewriting letters, and the bank records showing Alina's $500 payment to Yui. Yui sat with her parents looking small and scared, nodding and crying as each piece of evidence was shown, while Alina sat with her lawyer trying to look bored, even though her hands were shaking under the table. When they played the recording of Alina's parents trying to bribe my parents with that check, her lawyer started whispering frantically in her ear, but the damage was done. The panel asked Yui to explain her actions, and she stood up on shaky legs, admitting everything and apologizing repeatedly while explaining how jealousy and money clouded her judgment. Alina tried denying everything when it was her turn, claiming the money was a loan and the social media posts were jokes, but the panel members kept exchanging looks that showed they weren't buying it. They called me up to give my victim impact statement, and I described waking up scared every morning wondering what new threat would be in my locker, how I couldn't eat properly for days, and how I still jump when someone walks behind me in the hallway. Akimi went next and talked about how her sister violated her privacy, weaponized her deepest feelings, and destroyed the trust between them while making her question if anyone would ever accept her real self. Even the usually stern vice principal looked affected when Akimi's voice broke, describing finding out her own sister had turned her love into something scary and twisted. The panel reviewed Alina's social media harassment, where she called Akimi horrible names and encouraged others to bully her, plus the attempted bribe, which the panel chair said showed consciousness of guilt and attempt to obstruct justice. Alina's lawyer kept trying to minimize it as normal teenage drama that got out of hand, but the panel member, who was a former prosecutor, said the organized nature with money-changing hands elevated this to potential criminal conspiracy. Yui's therapist testified via video call about the progress Yui had made in understanding her actions, explaining how Yui's self-worth issues and constant comparison to her successful older sister created deep resentment that Alina exploited. The therapist recommended consequences focused on rehabilitation, including continued therapy, community service helping younger kids understand bullying, and supervised reconciliation with family members when everyone was ready. The panel deliberated for an hour, while we all waited in separate rooms, my parents holding my hands, while Akemi texted me from down the hall, where she waited with her family. When they called us back in, the panel chair announced Yui would receive in-school suspension through the end of the semester, mandatory twice-weekly counseling, and 100 hours of community service with the district's anti-bullying program. Yui accepted without complaint, and actually looked relieved to have a clear path forward with specific steps to make things right. For Alina, the consequences were much more severe, with immediate suspension pending transfer to another district, her family required to pay for 6 months of counseling for both me and Akemi, and a permanent mark on her disciplinary record that would follow her through college applications. Her parents started to protest, but their lawyer grabbed the father's arm and shook his head, clearly having warned them this was the best outcome given the evidence. After everyone else left, Akemi's family stayed in the empty conference room where Yui finally broke down, explaining how invisible she felt living in Akemi's shadow, how their parents always praised Akemi's grades and art while barely noticing Yui's achievements, and how that made her vulnerable to Alina's manipulation. Their parents looked devastated, realizing they'd contributed to this situation without knowing it, and their mom immediately said they'd start family therapy to work through these dynamics properly. The school sent out a letter to all parents that week, explaining they were implementing new policies about harassment through written communication and updating their cyberbullying protocols based on lessons learned from our case. They also added a unit to health class about coercion, bribery, and how seemingly small actions can escalate into serious legal issues, using our case anonymously as an example. 2 weeks after the hearing, Akemi and I went to the spring dance together as our first real public date, walking in holding hands while my stomach did flips, wondering how people would react. Most kids just smiled or ignored us completely, since the drama had mostly blown over, though a few people whispered and pointed, which Akemi handled by squeezing my hand tighter and pulling me onto the dance floor. We danced to 3 slow songs in a row, her head on my shoulder, both of us finally able to just be together without secrets or fear, and it felt like the actual beginning we should have had months ago. The next Monday, Officer Green called my parents to update us on the case against Alina. He explained that the prosecutor filed charges for conspiracy to harass and witness tampering because of the bribe her parents tried. Her family hired 3 different lawyers from a big firm downtown, but the evidence was too strong. The bank records showed the money transfer to Yui, we had the video of Yui changing the letters, and multiple witnesses heard Alina's threats on social media. Officer Green said she'd probably get probation and community service since it was her first offense, but the charges would stay on her record. Meanwhile, Yui started her community service at Washington Elementary the following week. She had to help with their anti-bullying program every Tuesday and Thursday after school. The first day, she came home crying because a second grader asked her why she was mean to her sister. But she kept going back, teaching the kids about kindness and how words can hurt people. After 2 weeks, she started sending Akemi pictures of the artwork the kids made about being nice to others. One drawing showed 2 stick figures holding hands with "sisters or friends" written in crayon above them. Akemi didn't respond at first, but she saved every picture on her phone. The district attorney's office called us 3 weeks later with their decision about Yui. They weren't going to file criminal charges because of her age, her full cooperation with the investigation, and the school's punishment plan. The prosecutor said Yui's genuine remorse and commitment to therapy played a big role in their decision. My parents were relieved because they didn't want a 14-year-old to have a criminal record, even though what she did was awful. Yui's parents made her write a thank you letter to the prosecutor for giving her a second chance. 3 months after that crazy birthday week, Akemi and I had settled into a real relationship. We talked about everything now. No more secrets or lies between us. She told me when she felt insecure about other girls talking to me, and I told her when I still had bad dreams about the letters. We went on regular dates to the movies or the mall, held hands in the hallways, and studied together at her house. Her parents always made sure Yui stayed in her room when I was over, which made things less awkward. The trauma from everything that happened actually brought us closer because we learned to communicate about hard stuff. We were careful not to let what happened define our whole relationship, though. We made new memories at the arcade, tried new restaurants, and even went to a pottery class where we both made terrible bowls. By the end of May, Yui finished her therapy program after 4 months of twice-weekly sessions. Her therapist said she made real progress understanding her jealousy and self-worth issues. She wrote apology letters to everyone involved, including my parents, her parents, Akemi, and me. The letter to me was 5 pages long, explaining how she felt invisible and worthless compared to Akemi, and how Alina's money made her feel important for once. She joined the drama club to meet new people and find healthier ways to express herself. The drama teacher said she was really good at playing emotional characters, probably because she understood complicated feelings now. She made friends with kids who didn't know about what happened, which gave her a fresh start. Alina's court date came up in early June, right before school ended. Her lawyers tried everything to get the charges dropped, but the judge wasn't having it. She got 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and had to pay for 6 months of counseling for me and Akemi. The criminal record meant she couldn't get into her dream college because they had a zero-tolerance policy for criminal convictions. Her family made a huge donation to the school's anti-bullying program the next week, probably trying to fix their reputation. Nobody felt bad for her, though, because she never apologized or showed any remorse. Akemi's mom called me one evening to share how family therapy had changed their home. They'd been going every week for 4 months, and the therapist helped them see how they'd ignored Yui's achievements while constantly praising Akemi. They started having weekly family meetings where everyone got equal time to talk about their week. Yui got her own art supplies because she wanted to learn drawing like Akemi, and their parents made sure to attend all her drama club performances. The therapist taught them communication techniques that stopped fights before they got bad. Akemi said dinner at home wasn't tense anymore, and Yui actually laughed at their dad's bad jokes again. At the end of year assembly, the school district gave Ms. Lawson and Mr. Saxton special awards for student safety advocacy. They used our case as an example of how to handle serious harassment situations properly. The district created new training based on how they managed everything, and other schools started calling them for advice. Ms. Lawson gave a speech about the importance of taking student concerns seriously, even when the situation seems impossible. Mr. Saxton talked about balancing punishment with rehabilitation for young offenders. They got a standing ovation from everyone, including me and Akemi. 6 months after my birthday, I finally slept through the night without waking up in a panic. The therapy sessions helped me process the fear I felt getting those threatening letters. My therapist taught me breathing exercises and grounding techniques for when anxiety hit. I was stronger now, but also more aware of warning signs in relationships and friendships. Akemi published an article in the school's literary magazine about the pressure teenagers face to label their sexuality before they're ready. She wrote about how fear of rejection made her create a fake identity that hurt her more than honesty would have. The article won a regional award for student journalism and got republished in 3 other school newspapers. She got messages from dozens of confused teens, thanking her for making them feel less alone. The school counselor called me 2 weeks later about setting up a supervised meeting between Yui and me. I wasn't ready, but Akemi convinced me it would help her family heal. We met in the counseling office on a Tuesday afternoon, with both the counselor and therapist present. Yui looked smaller than I remembered, her hands shaking as she read from a paper she'd written. She talked about jealousy eating her up inside and how the money made her lose sight of right and wrong. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but wanted me to know she was working on becoming better. I told her I appreciated the apology, and while we'd never be friends, I could handle being around her at family stuff. Akemi was waiting outside, and when she saw us both walk out calmly, she started crying with relief. The next month brought something unexpected when the state education board contacted our school about our case. They wanted to use what happened to us as an example in their new anti-bullying curriculum. We had meetings with education officials who took notes about every detail of the harassment and how it escalated. They asked if we'd consent to sharing our story anonymously to help other students recognize warning signs. My parents and Akemi's parents discussed it together, and we all agreed it could help prevent this from happening to others. The curriculum developers worked with us for weeks, creating materials that showed how jealousy and money could turn normal teenage drama into dangerous harassment. They included sections about recognizing manipulated messages, understanding coercion, and the importance of documenting evidence. Schools across the state would start using it next year. Spring came faster than expected, and suddenly we were counting down to graduation. The principal called Akemi into his office a week before the ceremony with news that made her cry happy tears. She'd been selected for the Courage Award, given to one student each year who showed exceptional bravery in difficult circumstances. The selection committee specifically mentioned her honesty in addressing both the harassment and her own identity struggles. Graduation day was perfect weather, and the whole gym was packed with families. When they called Akemi up for her award, she wore the biggest smile I'd ever seen. She thanked everyone who supported her through the crisis, and dedicated the award to anyone struggling with their truth. She mentioned our plans to attend the same state college in the fall, both of us ready for a fresh start away from all the drama. After the ceremony, even Yui came up to congratulate her sister, and they hugged for the first time in months. Looking back now from our dorm room at college, that birthday week feels like a lifetime ago. The fear from those threatening letters faded, but the lessons stuck with us. Love really does need courage to survive, and telling the truth, even when it's scary, beats living a lie every time. Real justice happened not through punishment alone, but through everyone learning and growing from their mistakes. Yui's in therapy and doing better, even started her own anti-bullying club at the school. Alina's family moved away after her probation ended, but I heard she's getting help too. Akemi and I are stronger together because we went through hell and came out the other side. We know what real trust means now, and we're building something that will last. That's the full story with the lesson tucked inside. I always want these to be more than just entertainment, something you can actually use. Hopefully one part clicked for you. Subscribe so you'll be ready for the next one.